Welcome back to the B2B Uncut podcast, sponsored by Oro Commerce. I'm your host, Aaron Sheehan, and I'm joined today by Kyler Nixon. Kyler, you've had a lot of jobs and a lot of roles in the B2B space. I think most recently we met through the B2B Commerce Association. Maybe for the audience, introduce yourself and what are you up to now?
Sure. Yeah. I took a little bit of a unique entry into the B2B e-commerce world. I guess when you kind of look at how people tend to stumble into B2B e-com, I haven't found necessarily anyone who intentionally jumped into B2B e-com. It's just sort of like I happened to get there. So I owned a marketing agency in a completely different vertical, completely different industry. Like if you think of what's the opposite of B2B e-com, it was that, right? And so I spent 6 or 7 years doing that, building an agency, and met a local distributor here in Madison, Wisconsin. And they brought me on to do some consulting, and I knew nothing about B2B e-commerce. Like I didn't know what an ERP was. I didn't know anything. Like I literally knew nothing about B2B e-com. They brought me in to do some messaging and really enjoyed it. And long story short, they ended up offering me a job as a chief revenue officer. And I was like, are you sure you got the right guy here? Like, I don't know anything about, B2B ecom. Like I'm kind of learning on the fly. Some stuff in my agency had changed and the timing just made sense for me to take that leap. And so I joined a smaller family owned distributor here right outside of Madison, Wisconsin. And really like, if you want to learn B2B ecom, just get thrown in the deep end and don't have any floaties. Like that's probably the best way that I could tell someone to learn. And that's what I did for a few years, was really learn the ins and outs of a family-owned distributor who was kind of a legacy brand, had all of these things that kind of come along with the B2B ecom experience, printed catalogs, high SKU count, performance marketing, like just you name it, all those things were kind of parts of the business. And so I was really able to get a great grasp on B2B ecom through that experience and through my time there. My son was born at the end of 2024 and kind of helped me reevaluate, like, what am I looking for personally and professionally? The business was in a good spot for me to step out. And so I decided to take the leap and go on my own again and work for myself. And because I had this like weird knowledge about B2B e-commerce, right? I'm like, what do I do with this? I decided to lean into it a little bit more. And originally was planning to do consulting. Like I was going to go on my own and kind of be a fractional chief revenue officer and do consulting. And as I was having conversations with distributors or agencies or vendor partners, email marketing just kept coming up. Like it was this topic that was brought up, no lie, Aaron, like probably 50 plus times in these conversations that I was having. And what I quickly learned was hardly anyone's leveraging email marketing. If they are, they're like maybe sending a few emails a week and they're not segmenting their audience. They're barely scratching the surface. And nobody is really using email to drive revenue and to drive growth. So a few months ago, a partner and I decided to launch what's sort of effective. I don't like the term agency, but for the conversation, that's what I'll call it. We launched.
What's your preferred term? Like, if it's
the business is called Ford Studios. Again, there's probably not a great term for it. The reason I don't like agency is because agency has this connotation of come alongside, take my money, don't deliver results, right? And so we're like, okay, what's the opposite of that? I don't have a great term, but we're effectively an agency, right? We're a partner that's delivering a service. And so we launched an email marketing agency, like specifically for B2B e-commerce distributors, and have really hit the ground running. So it's been a ton of fun to be able to blend that experience as a chief revenue officer, take what I've learned and what I know about, B2B ecom, and kind of focus down a little bit into a specific channel, which is email marketing.
Perfect. And it's interesting because coming out of I will admit to sort of working at agencies for many years myself, and the email marketing conversation was always an evergreen one, and there was always a lot of room to do stuff. I do want to talk a little bit about your CRO experience though, because a lot of the conversations that we've been having here with our current customers through our advisory board, going to events, talking, doing QBRs and things like that, is people are trying to figure out how to make sense of the market right now. There's a lot going on. I think even last night, there was said, so we're recording this on Thursday, May 29th. Last night, federal courts sort of overturned all of the Liberation Day tariffs. And so we're now sort of like going through what the market is doing market things. And people are trying to figure out, am I going to get refunds on the tariffs that I paid for the stuff that I brought in, the goods that I brought in?
Yeah.
Or is that gone? Is this going to stick around? Like, there's a lot of things going on in the market broadly.
Yeah.
Questions that we get is, how do we look at the market and predict for my business? How do I predict for my business what the next quarter is going to bring, what the next year is going to bring? And I'm interested, since you were on the sell side, you were on the revenue and growth side for a distributor. What kind of signals were you looking at from the wider market? Either like, let's talk to your sales team, talking to your customers, right? How did you think about planning for the next quarter? How much inventory to hold, what territories to go after, where to invest and where to pull back?
Yeah. If I had a perfect answer for planning, I'd be a billionaire right now. So I'll try to give you my take on it. But yeah, it's tough. Like, I'll just empathize with anyone listening. Like, there's a little bit of science, a little bit of art, and a little bit of just guessing, right? Like, it's just that's just is what forecasting and what planning is. I think for us, I think looking at sales pipelines is a really easy place to start, right? Because it doesn't matter if the sales team says we're going to be 150% over our goal this quarter. Well, if their pipeline is at a quarter of their goal, like, you're not going to hit that, right? And so I think that's just a really tangible way to understand what's happening within your current customer base. I think from a digital marketing standpoint, especially if distributors have a large portion of their revenue flowing through their e-com platform today, looking for signals like traffic, right? So are our current marketing channels working as hard for us now as they were 3 months ago or 12 months ago? If the answer to that is no, right, ad costs increasing, traffic decreasing, whatever the case, it's pretty tough to assume that that's going to go up, right? Like, you can pretty safely say, okay, this might hold steady, or we should forecast it down, right? And so looking at your ads, looking at your email traffic, looking at direct traffic, all of those things I think are helpful indicators to suggest what might happen in the next 3 months. And again, like I already said, if those are flat or they're down, it's really tough to convince me that they're going to go up, unless you're just going to pump a bunch more money into those channels. And even then, like, that money's probably not going to work as hard for you as it is right now.
ROAS can be a really misleading KPI sometimes, but and obviously, you got to adjust for seasonality and things like that. But I totally agree. Look at the signals that your existing business is giving you to make those projections. And there's a lot of data there. And I think that's something that, especially in B2B, I think digital's moved ahead a lot in the distribution space and manufacturing in the last 10 years. And generally, there's a lot more data captured and available on the marketing side if you've got it set up correctly that you can use. Like, it's that you don't just have to sort of like go consult a psychic,
Correct. Yeah. And attribution is still a black box. I mean, it's just nobody has really fully solved that. Google wants their piece of the pie. Facebook wants their piece of the pie. Your email tool wants its piece of the pie. Like, all of these different tools are going to kind of give you different views of attribution. So that's also not a perfect solution. What I will say is, like, now in 2025, the distributors that I'm talking to that are succeeding are taking a little bit of a backwards approach to what you would think they would do, right? Because I think what you think you would do is, okay, let's spread our business a little bit more broad. Let's figure out what might win and what might not win. And let's try to, like, hedge our bets here, right? And the brands that I'm talking to right now that are winning, they might be down from a revenue standpoint, intentionally or unintentionally, but they're doubling down on their highest performing verticals, their highest performing categories, and their highest performing products, right? They're not trying to be all things to all people. They're saying, look, these 5 verticals generate 70% of our sales. Let's lean more into that instead of trying to add product categories or go add more verticals. They're leaning into the success that they're already having.
That's good. And what struck me about that remark was that in some ways, what you're saying is that the people who are succeeding already did the go broad and learn thing cycles ago. And now they're implementing what they learned, which was like, here are our top margin, top performing products or regions or service lines. Let's niche into that. But to learn what those were, they probably had to look fairly widely at all of the possible, like the full assortment, the full set of markets that they sell into and all of that. So it's a do the right thing for the stage of your business where you're at. If you don't know those things, if you don't know what your high margin items are, if you don't know what your most popular items are, you can't niche into those, right?
Correct.
You don't know. So first learn, and second, then I think specialize is what you're saying. Like, don't, don't go chasing waterfalls, stick to the rivers and lakes that you're used to.
Right. Yeah. This model of like endless aisle, infinite SKUs thing that kind of popped up in like probably the, I guess, early 2000s as like printed catalogs just sort of went online, right? All of that still existed. The problem is like now the endless aisle, tens or hundreds of thousands of SKUs model, you're competing with Grainger, Uline, Fastenal, like some of these massive distributors, they outspend you in one day. Like they spend your entire marketing budget in one day, right? And so why would you try to compete with them SKU for SKU, vertical for vertical? Go find places that they're not succeeding or that they're not serving customers super well or deliver an experience that they can't provide and lean into that instead of saying, well, I think we could just provide a better experience or a little bit better cost or a little bit better shipping rates. Like that's not going to be enough to like truly move the needle, especially in, the way the economy is right now.
Totally. So it sounds like kind of unusually, and you sort of remarked at the beginning that nobody deliberately sets out to get into B2B commerce, which I agree. That's actually been a long running theme with many of the guests here is you ask for people sort of like, how did you get here? And it's a very sort of like non-linear path. But it sounds like you brought marketing experience to that chief revenue officer job, which I will say is unusual. That's not a traditional path. A lot of people get into that through pure sales or ops a lot of times in distribution.
Yeah.
So, but I'm guessing that because you started off, you said it was your first sort of job was sort of as far afield from B2B. But I'm guessing how you thought about growth and knowing the tools and levers that you could pull on to affect that growth, you probably had some advantages over other people for that job because of your background, even if it wasn't sort of a one-to-one match. I'm curious, what was the very first sort of like lever that you pulled as chief revenue officer to like it affect the growth? What was the first sort of strategy or tactic that you invested in?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really making me think back to it. One, I will say we did want to grow our sales team, right? So we had a really healthy house file. We had, it was a legacy brand, 85 years old. And so we had a lot of historical brand kind of trust and authority in various industries. And we had a very small sales team. I think when I started, it was one person, right? And so that was definitely an area we wanted to lean into because we felt if we could add a human approach to sales, then that's going to be beneficial for us, build relationships and go try to find new customers. So from a sales standpoint, that was pretty cut and dry. Get more reps, assign them good accounts, and then try to help them grow those accounts, right? From a marketing standpoint, there was a few things that we tried to tackle kind of in that first 12 to 18 months. One was organic SEO. When I started, it was at just a downhill. I can't even call it a slide. I mean, it was just a free fall. Like it was just getting hammered month over month over month. And so that was a really, really big challenge for us. And it took, the full time that I was there. Finally, right before I left, it started going back up and was recovering to where it was, even when I started. But that was a massive challenge for us, right? Email was definitely an area of opportunity. What I will say though is when I started, we had a great team that was already doing email in-house for us, which I think is abnormal for distributors. And so a big chunk of our revenue, 20 to 30% of our revenue was coming from email.
That's healthy.
So yeah, which is again, very unique, I think, for how most distributors get email revenue. So there's obviously opportunities to optimize and build retention strategies and all of that type of stuff, of course. But generally speaking, email was in a pretty good spot kind of right when I started. And then the third and kind of like 3A, 3B thing that we did was we wanted to lean into the user experience better on the site and clarify our messaging for those customers, right? So we didn't want to just sound like every other distributor. We wanted to lean into the unique things that we provide that other people don't provide, right? So that's messaging and positioning. And then the second part of that was obviously we wanted to make sure the site reflected the great experience that we were sort of promising through our words, right? So we overhauled the site from a UX UI standpoint. We didn't re-platform or anything like that, but that was a big project, right? We added better search functionality, we added better quoting tools. We just leaned into the buying journey more and treated it like a true B2B site instead of sort of a B2C site that has all these SKUs and hopefully you can find a way around.
I love that theme. That's an evergreen topic for us, obviously, given
for sure. Yeah,
we're in. What percentage of the business was sort of like e-commerce versus field sales, counter sales, rep led? Was it a split, or did you run did everything go through the e-commerce site?
Yeah, good question. Again, it was a little unique in that it was probably 70 to 80% of our revenue was flowing through the e-com platform and never actually touched a salesperson or an offline channel.
Got it.
Which is pretty high from.
That's very high. That's very high. I mean, I can think of a lot of e-com directors who would give their left leg to have 20% of the business. So
yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about this later on. But I mean, we have our mutual friend Justin King with the B2B eCommerce Association.
For sure.
Justin and I, one of our first conversations, I sort of was like, Justin, like you talk a lot about adoption, right? Platform adoption, getting people to adopt the platform. All that's great. Like that's important. The world that I was in was acquisition, right? We needed to get more customers and then we needed to retain those customers. We didn't have an adoption problem. We needed more, we just needed more customers, right? And so that spectrum in B2B is kind of fascinating to just see like some brands have very little revenue flowing through their platform and they just need to get more revenue flowing through, which is adoption, or companies need to just get more new customers, right? Which is acquisition. So definitely kind of a unique spectrum.
Absolutely. The great thing about e-commerce is that it scales more linearly and more effectively than the traditional offline model. So, and I kind of, you alluded to this earlier, but email marketing as a channel is under-resourced and underappreciated, I would say, generally speaking. I would say in e-commerce for sure, especially among, I would say, SMB to mid-market brands, like sometimes the big enterprises will throw a big team at it, but like it takes a while to get to that point. And, a lot of, honestly, even very large companies are still doing sort of like the one that they've got a footer link, sign up for our newsletter and they'll send, everybody gets the same newsletter once a month, maybe.
Maybe is the key word there for sure.
So I'm super curious. I know when we talked before, you mentioned that when in your current role in your not an agency that is an agency, but it's not an agency.
Right.
You did a survey about around sort of the email channel. I'm curious, like what did your survey, how did that work and what did you find?
Yeah, so it was pretty informal, right? So at some point I would love to do a more detailed, probably larger survey on this. It was sort of like, I'm seeing this a lot. Let's pull on that thread and just see what happens. So we reviewed distributor websites for probably around 100 to 130. I should have that exact number. Distributor websites, right? And all we did was go to their site. We've said, do they have a pop-up or do they have an opt-in, right? Like you mentioned a minute ago, a lot of them have the little join our newsletter in the footer. Like 95% of those distributor websites, when I entered my email address, I got nothing. Like, I don't even think that the email, like the box on the bottom of the site was connected to an email service provider, right? And so think about how much revenue is being left on the table by these distributors simply because they're not capturing email and then doing something with it, right? I talked to a distributor who's spending well into 6 figures on Google Ads, right? Like they're driving hundreds of thousands of people to their site every single month. And they aren't capturing that traffic. So unless that customer purchases something, you just sent 98% of your website traffic, you just let them walk out the door, right? And you paid for them. Like you paid to get them onto your site and then you did nothing after that, right? And so D2C, it's tough to compare D2C and B2B and some people have feelings about all that. But in general, D2C has figured that out, right? Like email marketing and D2C, every D2C site you go to is going to have a pop-up or is going to have something that's going to greet you within the first, 10 to 30 seconds. Well, why do they do that? It's because it's capturing the traffic that's on the site and then being able to nurture them through email. So that was the biggest thing that we found was so many of these distributors, they're literally not even capturing the traffic they're already paying to drive to their site.
It's really interesting too, because, when you're in the room having the conversation, I've heard many times, well, my mental map of my customers is that my customers are just like me and they skew in B2B, they skew older, they skew more male typically. And there's a certain amount of, I don't know a better word for this, but maybe crankiness around like the idea of an email capture pop-up or like, well, I never fill those out. I wouldn't fill that out. So no one will. When you talk to decision makers in D2C and B2C brands, you'll hear a lot of the same sentiment, which is I never click those, I never fill those out. Therefore, no one else will. And yet, email is one of the top performing channels in almost every healthy e-commerce business I've ever identified. Because it's personalized. It has the ability to be very personalized. It can be very targeted based on user actions. And everybody has an email account. So the truth is that people will and do. And if they didn't, there wouldn't be a whole bunch of very expensive email marketing platforms out there in the world, and inexpensive ones. But it's a rich, well-served, sort of almost commodified world. And like, if people's break room conversations around how they would never do that were true, that wouldn't happen. And so I think you're absolutely right in that you can't just drive the traffic to the site and then not present them with an opportunity to get on a list and maybe find out something about them, for retargeting purposes
Right.
or list building purposes. Are
Right.
you a distributor? Are you a retailer? Are you a supply? Like, what is your role in the supply chain? Where are you? What do you do?
Yeah.
Learn things about the people, and then you can like market to them later, and maybe they don't buy something. Nobody buys something on the first visit, right? Like,
Sure.
it takes some time.
The nice thing about like a platform like Oro too is, and in e-com platforms in general, is they have these events and this data already baked in, right? So if Aaron, if you come to my site and I capture you as a lead, right? You give me your email address in exchange for whatever I am offering to you. Well, then you come back and you visit my site, or you come back and you build a quote, or you come back and build a cart. Now I know that about you, and I can cater my messaging to help you in your buying journey. I agree with those executives who are like, email marketing sucks if you are just simply blasting product into your customer's face and not actually helping them through their buying journey. That's the wrong way to approach email. 100%. It's not super effective. It's annoying. It's spammy. It's all the things people hate about email marketing, right? But on the flip side, if we have those events and that data flowing in from our ERP or from our e-commerce platform like Oro, it allows us to meet that customer where they're at on their buying journey and help them and hold their hand until they buy. And then through the purchase, we can then come back and do it again, right? That's as simple as I can sum up the value of email.
No, that's exactly right. And it's funny because we have at Oro, we have an awful lot of tools for segmentation and personalization inside the platform. I have a feeling that a lot of those aren't used, to be super honest, at scale because people aren't thinking about it that way.
Right.
And we do a lot of surveys as well of the market. We just commissioned one that is out now on buyer behavior. I think you can go to our website and find it, or our social and find it. I can put the link in the show notes. But one of the questions that we asked was, what features on a B2B, and we're asking B2B buyers, right? So from big companies, what are you using? Because we're always curious, like what are the experiences that you're trying to get out of the portals or e-commerce websites or apps or whatever that you're using to buy? And I think about 2/3 of the respondents said that if personalization was present, they always or often used it if it was available. Now, a lot of times, good personalization, that's not even a feature that you know that you're using because it's part of your journey and like it's invisible to you that you've been segmented. But I'm curious, what are some good ways to segment an audience in B2B sales or distribution so that you can market to them in a way that does feel personalized? What are some successful things that you've seen done?
Yeah, I love that. It's such a good question. I think the other reason why people struggle with this idea of personalization is because they think that it's simply displaying the company name when they log into the site or displaying the buyer name when they log in. Welcome back, Bob. Like, okay, sure, I guess that's personalization, but that's like caveman personalization, right? Like it's not that complex, right? From an email marketing standpoint, you've said this a couple times, but that's one of the biggest reasons I love email, right? In an ad, a Google ad, I cannot personalize that ad or that listing to that customer, right? I can maybe have some control over who sees it and who doesn't see it. But beyond that, everyone's seeing the same thing no matter where they're at in their buying journey. And so with email, because we have access to so much data, right? Whether it's first party data that flows through your ERP or through your e-com site, or it's events and behavior that the customer takes on the site, we know a lot about our customer if that tool is set up correctly. Like we know a ton of things that help us personalize both the information that we send and also when we send it, right? Right customer, right time, right message. That's our focus when we're setting up email marketing campaigns. And so the way that we think about, your original question of how do you segment these from a retention standpoint and trying to grow our LTV within our existing customers, we keep it really simple. We want to segment customers into either inside of the buying window or outside of the buying window. Okay. And this is going to vary depending on the type of client you serve and the industry that you're in, all that fun stuff. But generally speaking, when a customer is outside of their buying window, we can look for indicators that they might be entering into their buying window. Maybe they buy every 6 months. Maybe they're building a quote. Maybe they're visiting the site more often, right? At that point, we can then personalize the types of messages that we send them. We can lean a little bit more into offers, a little bit more into products, and try to get that sale, right? If the customer isn't really interacting with our site a ton, they're not kind of filling out quotes, they're sort of outside of their normal buying cycle, we just say, hey, look, you're outside of your buying window. And our goal here isn't to try to get you to buy something that you don't need. It doesn't work in B2B, just to be clear. Our goal here is to nurture that relationship, build trust with them, add value to them, and then slowly behind the scenes start to look for indicators that they're back in the buying market, right? And all of that is personalization. That's what that is. It's just meeting that customer exactly where they're at with a well-timed message and a well-timed offer and a well-timed product or a category of products in front of them.
Yep, totally. That's a great answer. And I think I'm hoping this is a part of the podcast that, like, when we look at the listener statistics, like, people listen to what you just said if at great volume.
Aaron, if they drop off at that point, just don't tell me, okay? Like, I just don't want to know.
We don't. It'll be your secret is safe with us.
Okay.
So let's talk about the framework. We talked before that you had kind of a 3-bucket approach to email marketing. How do you think about those buckets exactly? And maybe if you've got some examples of what falls at what kinds of tactics or sequences or workflows kind of like fall into those buckets, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. So I think I mentioned this at the start of the episode, but our agency is only focused on B2B, right? So one of the challenges with email marketing agencies, there's a ton of D2C agencies and they don't understand B2B buying cycles. And so they just try to apply D2C principles into B2B. It works like a little bit, but then like a lot of it doesn't, right? And so I've talked to so many distributors who struggle with that because they're like, they made us sound too consumer, or they didn't understand our customer, or they didn't understand quoting, or all these other things that are kind of unique to B2B. So I say that as context because what we build, it's called the Forward Framework. It's 3 parts that are designed to kind of build and move on to each other. It's designed for business buyers and for distributors. Okay, so I just want to give that context up front. The first part of that is what we call conversion catalyst. And so we talked about this for a little while, but when you are driving traffic to your site and then you're not capturing and trying to convert that traffic, you're just letting people leave. Like, you're effectively just wasting money on
a conversion is not necessarily a purchase.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
It can be a purchase, or it could be someone who's just starting to engage with your brand or build a quote or whatever the case might be.
Request a quote, request a sample, learn more, register for your, our reseller program, like whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. We tend to work with a little bit more direct purchase distributors. So in that case, obviously that is a true conversion, but at the same time, the goal of get them into our ecosystem and get them to do kind of the next step with our brand, that is what a conversion would be for sure. We have another brand that we're working with right now that sells to contractors. Well, for them, contractors are bidding deals all the time, right? Well, that's a conversion, as if we can get that lead to start to quote projects with us, right? So yeah, that's the first step, is we just say, hey, look, if you don't really have this built out right now, we want to set it up for you that has a curiosity-driven opt-in, a trust-building welcome flow, and then a follow-up engine that gets people into what we're doing, right? Pretty straightforward. So that's the first part of the framework, which again, we call conversion catalyst. The second part is really the meat and potatoes of kind of an entire email marketing strategy, which is called our sales signal system. And really, as the name suggests, we're kind of constantly looking for signals that the customer might be inside of their buying window. And so like I mentioned a few minutes ago, we say customers are either inside or they're outside of their buying window. We look for signals that suggest they're moving in or they're moving out. If they are inside of their buying window, we send tactical things like campaigns, right? Browse abandonment, checkout abandonment, quote follow-up flows, like all of these things that are, again, meeting them where they're at in their buying journey and supporting that journey with email marketing. If they're outside of their buying window, we're going to keep looking for signals that they're ready to buy, right? They visit the site more often, they build a quote, all those things. But if that doesn't happen, again, we just want to stay front of mind. So we send things like newsletters, we send non-product based campaigns, which I would call like a brand building campaign.
Right.
And then inside of that, we also do what I call lapsed flow. So if you identify that, hey, customers normally buy from us every 12 months, well, at month 13, we want to start re-engaging the customers that didn't buy from you within the last 12 months, right? So that whole ecosystem, we've got, it's a framework that I wish I had a visual, right? So this is an auditory medium, so it's a little bit challenging to communicate that. But that's what we do as part of our sales signal system. Is it's just a retention and LTV, increasing model. And then the last piece is our adoption anchor. And so the goal there is to try to get people to use your ecom platform, right? And you use email marketing to do that. So 3 parts: conversion catalyst is for acquisition. Second part is sales signal system, which is retention. And then adoption anchor is for customer adoption.
Perfect. I love that. I think it's a really good way of thinking about it. I know there are similar frameworks applied to like adoption, and really I think if you were to boil down what you sort of name dropped Justin King earlier, if you kind of like boil down his approach to adoption, I think both of your frameworks are get the customer doing the next thing.
Correct.
Whatever it is. Like it could be whatever you define it, but get them logging back in or coming back to the site or calling, like even it could be offline, get them re-engaging on the next thing. You're driving the next click or the next conversation. And then over time, those build to sales. And the great thing about B2B that's different from D2C is that once you've got them acquired and converted, the long-term revenue on that account can be quite substantial. They will come back. They will come back because they're buying for their jobs. So it's not like I clicked on an Instagram ad because they had a shirt that I really liked the ad for. I bought it. I'm never going to go back to it. I'm not creating an account with that merchant. I'm not going to reorder probably. But it's different in B2B. And so the ROI is, I think, huge in B2B because you'll still be eating off that acquisition 5 years from now. Like you'll still be getting revenue on that on a $10 ad or something. Like
totally. And that's why we start with that acquisition offer, right? Their conversion catalyst is because if you're not even capturing people, it's not just the short-term costs that you're missing, which is potential revenue and letting people leave the site and you're spending on traffic that's leaving. You also have zero chance to then sell to that customer next year and the year after and the year after, right? There's a ton of long-term downstream opportunity costs that you're missing if you don't capture those leads.
Yep. So final sort of serious question then on this, and you'll hear why I use the word serious in a moment there. Yeah, you're a part of the B2B Commerce Association. We talked about that. I've had several of their members on lately. We've had Justin King on. We've had Jason Hine. There have been several other folks, Jay Schneider recently on as well. It feels like every couple of weeks they're adding a new SME to the roster of consultants and authors and thought leaders at the B2B Commerce Association. You're one of them now. How do you view, and I know I don't want to ask anything that's going to get you in trouble necessarily, but I'm just curious, what is your impression of the mission of the B2B Commerce Association and kind of what's the most interesting thing that you've seen out of them since you've been a part of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So just slight little quick backstory. When I was a chief revenue officer, I found that role to be incredibly isolating. Like I didn't know that all of these communities and associations existed, right? And so for me, when I'm Googling how to do this or strategies around this, I'm getting D2C answers and I'm being met with D2C practitioners. There was not, and there still isn't, to be clear, there's so much opportunity, but there wasn't a lot of resources around B2B, right? And so I remember I left my job and I didn't have a safety net. And I was like, I don't know who else is doing anything out here in this space, right? I was holding my son for a nap and I was on LinkedIn and I typed in B2B e-commerce and Justin King popped up, right at the top, which subsequently probably the best first person, to pop up on LinkedIn. And so I kind of stalked his profile for a couple of days and then I sent him a message and I said, hey man, love what you guys are doing. Like this is really cool. I felt really isolated in my role and I'm, whatever, let me know if you want to jump on a call and would love to learn more. And that just built kind of a really cool relationship where I've been able to connect with Justin and, Jason Hine and Jason Greenwood, Jay Schneider, Sarah Falcon, their marketing director, has been an awesome resource. There's just a ton of people that are a part of the B2B association that have contributed so much, not just recently, but over the last 10 plus, 20 plus years to B2B e-commerce. And so as a younger guy in the space, their ability to just say, hey, look, come along and let me, put my arm around you and kind of show you how it's done and show you where there's opportunity and kind of how to conduct yourself in this space has been really helpful. For me personally, I'm incredibly grateful for that. Then as I've been able to kind of lean into the association a little bit more from an SME or whatever you want to call the title coach or whatever the correct term is there, the part that I love about the mission of the B2B EA is how practitioner focused it is, right? And so like I said, I, as a CRO, was a practitioner. And so I see a lot of these associations out there that are focused more on the vendors, focused more on the consultants, focused more on the agencies. And we need that. However, we can't create an echo chamber of providers and ignore practitioners because the conversations that are happening in boardrooms and in meetings and in executive rooms, they're very disconnected from what I think happens when vendors and agencies are talking. And so the more we can marry that up and make sure that everyone's speaking the same language and moving in the same direction, I think is really helpful. And, Justin and Brett and all those guys, their mission and goal to do that is really, really helpful. So I think that's great. The last thing practically that I would say, I'm super pumped about B2B e-commerce world, their event that they're putting on. I think they have 3 different events. The one that I'll be at in November is in Scottsdale. So that's their US.
We'll be there too. So I'll see you.
Perfect.
I'll see you in Scottsdale. Oh
Lovely.
yeah.
I want to get some beard tips, Aaron. So that's my goal in Scottsdale.
Just rub motor oil into your face every day.
Okay.
Good. That's the trick. Yep.
So now we don't even need to talk down there.
Exactly.
So,
I love the idea that you sort of like were stalking, you sort of like outside of Justin King's window with the boombox and the cue cards, like Love Actually, like, hi, I'm just a B2B e-commerce practitioner looking for advice. Everything you said about the EA really resonates with me as well. We are a provider, so we are a member of but we are, to your point, we joined it and invest in it because they don't just let it turn into a marketplace for providers.
Correct.
Like, there's no value in that. Like, it just becomes an undifferentiated set of billboards along the highway, like if you're doing it that way. So being committed to the actual adoption and success of B2B e-commerce. We've talked about this many times on this show as well. Honestly, Kyler, you mentioned it. And I love that you did. This was totally sort of unprompted. The isolating nature of being responsible for e-commerce as a channel in B2B, because so few people still do it, and you feel like you're on an island a lot of times, and there's no one inside the business that can sort of like teach it to you because it's new to them too. And so it can be. We have this conversation. I have that conversation probably 2 or 3 times a month with people that I meet who have the job of like e-commerce director, or they have a channel responsibility inside of a manufacturer distributor, and they're like, I was running the WordPress site, and then they say, congratulations, you're responsible for it.
I was kidnapped and I was brought to this back room, and they gave me a computer and they said, all right, now you're in B2B e-com. I think that's
exactly right. Yes. No one sets out to be there because they don't even know it's an option when they're registering for their major in school. I'm going to ask the last question of the show. Longtime listeners know what's coming, but you probably don't. I always ask every guest for a recommendation for a book, movie, a TV show, podcast, magazine, newspaper, whatever, something that you've read or engaged with in the last few months that you liked. And it does not need to be business related. It can be.
Okay.
If you're trying to score extra brownie points. Sure. But like, it could be a stupid TV show too. Like, that's fine. Like, we love we love everything. One thing that stood out to you that you liked, or 2 or whatever. You could add.
Oh man, I should have been better prepared for this.
I never prep guests for this question. It's always an ambush. I don't want people to get extra credit. I read the Harvard Business Review. No, you didn't. Like,
you loser. So lately, I've been really into. This is like, I'll tie it back to business, but it's not inherently a business response. I really enjoy reality game shows. So like, I hadn't not gotten into Survivor at all. Like, I literally had never watched Survivor, and I've kind of recently been getting into it a little bit more. And the like psychology and strategy behind that, and like how people interact with each other, like all of that is really fascinating to me to like understand like how people think and how they operate. So that's kind of an interesting, I guess, TV show. I really enjoy the podcast How I Built This with Guy Raz. I'm sure you've gotten that answer.
Oh yes, I have actually. Yes,
it's just such a good podcast. He has a couple more. He has one where he interviews. It's called Wisdom from the Top. That one's another one if you like Guy Raz. That like he's interviewed like founders and CEOs that have come through crazy struggles and had to turn their business around. It's kind of the opposite of How I Built This. I'm not a big book guy. I listen to audiobooks, or I like skim through audiobooks. So I don't know that I can come up with like a great one.
Totally fine.
That would be super helpful for your audience.
Podcasts work. Podcasts and reality adventure shows. So it absolutely works. It's good. See, and that's the kind of authentic answer that you get. When you don't prep people for that question ahead of time. We've had all kinds of.
I have a 7-month-old, like I mentioned. So like my brain's about at like 40% capacity right now. So I'll if I come back on, I'll give that a better thought and
it gets better. Once all the teeth are in and they're sleeping through the night, I promise, like it does wonders for your clarity and mental acuity. So
right.
Kyler, really appreciate the time coming on our podcast. I think there were some very good actionable insights that you shared with the audience. And I think it's a perspective we've not really like had on here a lot. So I think we will talk again. We will clearly meet at Scottsdale later on, and probably before that at another show or conference. But we will, if you can send me the links to your the business, the not agency that you have, anything you want, we'll get it in the show notes so people can contact you?
Cool.
If somebody does want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, I'm really active on LinkedIn, so you can probably find me by my name because nobody else has that name. So it's just Kyler, Kyler, and then Nixon, Nixon. I'm really responsive to DMs. And then if you're interested in partnering together, you can go to goforwardstudios.com and you can schedule a call or shoot me an email there.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Cool.
Really appreciate it. And listeners, thank you. And we will see you next time.